My grandparents lived nearby when I was growing up, on the corner of Hinkler and Gallagher's Road in Glen Waverley. There stood my dad's family home where he lived during most of his high school years and into his university education. It just so happens that this house stood right in between our home and the primary school that I attended. So it was easy to stop in en route for a bowl of crinkle cut potato chips and a cool glass of lemonade. As a young child, I loved exploring the stuff stored away in the spare room at my grandparents' house. Do you have a spare room like that in your place? The one where boxes, photographs, books, pieces of disused furniture that will end up stored away, just in case they're needed at some undeterminate day in the future. Often during a Sunday afternoon, following a lamb roast lunch, as a kid I was left to amuse myself while the grown-ups sat around the dining table talking about grown-up stuff, like the roadworks on the Monash, the price of petrol and which supermarket represented the best value for the weekly grocery haul. All important stuff, I'm sure, but of very little interest to a young boy. So rather than die of boredom, I'd often take myself off to the spare room to see what treasures I could find there. There was a big orange hopper ball that I'd pull out and bounce up and down the hallway on. And when I became bored of that, there were countless boxes of golf trophies, massive bags of golf balls, which my granddad insisted could only be used once or twice before needing replacing, all sorts of novelty paraphernalia and postcards accumulated from years of holidays. There was a peculiar red heat lamp of mysterious purpose, and countless other knickknacks. But one of my favourite treasures hidden in the spare room was a big, hard, yellow plastic Dolphin torch. At the time, these were the bee's knees, bright and powerful with a specialised, enormous 6-volt battery. Prior to the advent of the mag light, which advertisers demonstrated being run over by a truck, the Dolphin torch was king of the handheld luminary device realm. According to the ads, you could drop it in water and it'd float. A handy attribute, I'm sure, but not one that I was ever fortunate enough to test, though I often dreamt of sneaking out past the dining room table to the Clark Rubber above-ground backyard swimming pool to give it a go. Everyone had torches back then, and you needed a couple. You needed one in the kitchen, one in the drawer of the bedside table, a couple others in the spare room, just in case the trusty Melbourne power supply failed, resulting in a total blackout. And blackouts were usually a result of some kind of natural disaster, like a tree falling across the power lines in the midst of a storm, or the result of far too many air conditioners operating across Melbourne during another string of 40-degree summer days. When the lights went off, after reminding the family not to open the fridge, Dad would race off to grab his trusty torch from his bedside table, so that we could in turn look for our torches to complete the evening chores. Nothing better than brushing your teeth by torchlight as a kid. The beam of a torchlight sheds a whole new perspective on a familiar environment. It invites the observer to zero in on the specifics, to see objects from new angles, perhaps previously unconsidered. The trouble with those old torches, including even the revered Dolphin torch, was the batteries never seemed to last very long. After the blackout, once the power came back on, the torches were inevitably tossed aside, back into the spare room and the drawers, and forgotten about for months until the next blackout. Usually, by which time the battery had gone completely dead flat. The short life of the batteries meant we were continually casting them out into the landfill bin to be buried out of sight and out of mind in a big hole in the ground somewhere, while fresh batteries were purchased from the best value supermarket in town as determined by the discourse at Sunday lunch without giving it a second thought. Just last night, I was out for a hike with a young fella who I've been working with for a little while, and as we were returning to the car, the last light of the day faded, and about 5-10 minutes before we reached the end of the trail, I had to reach into my backpack and I pulled out my trusty Dolphin torch. Said nobody ever. See, the Dolphin torch, despite being impressive in its ability to float on water, just like Jesus, was never a great hiking option due to its enormous size and miserable battery life. So what I actually reached for in my backpack was my cheap, made in China LED torch. With USB charging capability, there are no more batteries cast out into the darkness of the landfill bin. And though rather diminutive in size, the LED torch lights up the hiking trail like the headlamp on a freight train. So long as I give it a little recharge every now and then, the little LED torch is a reliable and convenient tool. So while the purpose of the torch remains the same, and the joy of exploring by torchlight, to see the world in the sharp focus of a narrow beam of light, can still be an illuminating experience for the curious mind, handheld luminary technology has evolved and been refined to become far more efficient, environmentally friendly, and user-friendly. My son Jed is the same age that I was when I remember visiting my grandparents' house all those years ago. And to my delight, he keeps a collection of little LED torches next to his bed, prepared and ready just in case there are things that need to be illuminated in the dark of night.